The title of the sermon today, as many of you have already seen, is Hunk of Burning Love. Hunk of Burning Love. Now, I just thought of that title because of what I was going to speak about today, Hunk of Burning Love. And I really want to do a lot of things. I wanted to wear an Elvis costume with the white... But Hunk of Burning Love. It's interesting, that song, it came out in 72. And before I was born. In 72, and after 70, as if I recall correctly, Elvis never had another number one hit. And as close as he got to a number one hit was with this song, Hunk of Burning Love. And it only got to number 2. And it was very unfortunate. And it was very discouraging, annoying to him. The reason that it never could get to number 1 is because Chuck Berry had a song in front of it. It was a number 1. And it was a ridiculous song. That My Ding-a-Ling song was the name of the Chuck Berry one. And it's just ridiculous how that would make it to number 1. But nonetheless, it's not even a good song, but nonetheless it did. And it kept Elvis from getting a number 1 song there in the 70s. And of course, they're all secular songs and of really no value. But I was thinking of the title, Hunk of Burning Love. And we hear about Satan, and we see cartoons of Satan. And we see movies about Satan. We even got a show that comes up once a week now, Lucifer. And I haven't seen it, but many people have seen it. And from what I understand, it's about Lucifer changing his ways. Wants to be a good guy now. And anyway, it's just ridiculous to think of the different types of pictures and stuff that we draw up of Satan. And even in cartoons, I remember I used to watch as a kid, and of course the devil, he's red with the horns and all those good things. And he's also in charge of hell. The devil is in charge of hell. He's the boss of hell. That's the picture that's painted of him. He's the god of fire. That's what happens. Satan can burn you. He's got the pitchfork and he throws you in the oven. He controls all of those different things. Satan, the god of fire. But actually, as we look through the Bible, Satan has a counterfeit for everything. And I've been thinking about all of his counterfeits here lately. I had a sermon not too long ago about some of the counterfeits. And Satan stole that analogy also, that he's the god of fire, that he's the consuming fire, that he's in control of fire. I want you to turn with me this morning to the book of Exodus. Exodus chapter 3. Exodus chapter 3. And here in this story, it's about the calling of Moses. And beginning here in Exodus chapter 3, with verse 1, the Bible tells us, it says, "Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the backside of the desert. And he came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush." Now notice, the fact that he saw a bush burning was really no big deal. It says, "And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, but the bush was not consumed." Okay, it wasn't the fact that the bush was burning. Let's look here at verse 3. "And Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burnt." What drew him to that fire? what drew him over there to it was not that the bush was on fire. He saw that. So I don't know, maybe that was a common thing. Maybe they walked around out in the desert and saw bushes burning all the time. But what drew him to this one, he said what made him turn aside is he looked at that bush and he was like, it ain't burning up. Now, what it means by not burning up, that doesn't mean that it smoked it black. It doesn't mean that it burned it a little, but it didn't burn it away. It doesn't mean that it burnt slow. It meant that the bush was fine. But there was a burning fire in the bush, but the bush was fine. And Moses says, man, that is something. That's what attracted Moses to the bush. That this consuming fire had this ability to burn, but not burn the bush. And so Moses went over there to the bush, and of course, the Bible tells us the story of how Moses was called by God to deliver the children of Israel out of Egypt. He says, remove your shoes because the ground that you're standing on is holy ground. Now, I want you to look with me here in Exodus. Just keep turning forwards, and I want to go to Exodus chapter 13. This was after the children of Israel came out of Egypt in Exodus chapter 13, and I want to look at verse 21. Exodus chapter 13, verse 21. And the Bible says here in Exodus chapter 13, verse 21, it says, and the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of a cloud to lead them the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, to go by day and night. And so they were walking around out there in the desert, and leading them in the daytime was this cloud, or maybe this big cloud of smoke, if you will. Have you ever set a fire? I've got this stump that we've been burning, this big huge tree stump behind my house, and I've been burning it for me and my neighbor. We've both been tag team burning it, and we'll burn it, we'll set it. And I noticed that during the day I'll light it and it'll burn, and the fire and the flame will just go out, and you'll just see some smoke, but no fire, no flame. You'll just see some smoke, and the stump, the trunk is all white, and it's just smoke. But at nighttime when it gets dark, you go out there and man, the thing is just glowing orange, right? Because you can see it at nighttime. And so there's this cloud in the sky, right? In the daytime, it looks like a cloud, smoke. But at the nighttime, you can see this big blazing fire, right? And the Bible says that that's the Lord. The Lord went before them by day, this big blazing fire. Now I want you to look with me, keep turning in the book of Exodus, and I want to go to chapter 24. Chapter 24, the book of Exodus, and I want to go to verse 17. Exodus chapter 24, verse 17. And this is when Moses came to the Mount Sinai, and he was there, and he was going to go up, and God came down to the top of the mountain. And it says here in Exodus 24, verse 17, it says, "In the sight of the glory of the Lord was like devouring fire on the top of the mount in the eyes of the children of Israel." Now Moses went up into the midst of the cloud and got him up into the mount, and Moses was in the mount 40 days and 40 nights. Moses had faith, right? Why do you reckon, get this, the mountain's up there, God's on top of the mountain, there's a consuming fire. Again, every time we see God, there's this consuming fire, right? And he tells Moses to come up to the top of the mountain. There's a consuming fire on top of the mountain, but Moses, he goes to the top of the mountain and he goes on in, right? Do you think maybe because he knew the fire of God, because he had seen the fire of God burning and a bush didn't consume? And Moses knew, if he can keep that bush, he can keep me, right? And so, there we go. It's consuming fire, top of this mountain. Now I want you to turn forward with me to Corinthians and Chronicles. I'm sorry, not Corinthians, but Second Chronicles. Second Chronicles, and in Second Chronicles, I want to look there at chapter 7. Second Chronicles, chapter 7. You got Kings, and then you got Chronicles. And Second Chronicles, I'm in First Chronicles, but Second Chronicles, chapter 7. And in Second Chronicles, chapter 7, I want to begin reading there with the first verse. Now, this was the temple that was built by Solomon. And in the wilderness, when they had the temple in the wilderness, the Bible tells us in Exodus chapter 40, the last chapter there in the book of Exodus, in this first temple, it says after they got the temple all built, that God came down and dwelt in that temple. And when he did, it tells us about the smoke. Again, this cloud of smoke. They had to get away from it. And here in chapter 7, Solomon builds a temple. And after he builds a temple, he got down on his knees and he said a long prayer. And after he got down on his knees and he said a prayer, and they had to sacrifice there, it says here in chapter 7, 2 Chronicles, chapter 7, verse 1, it says, "Now when Solomon had made an end of praying, the fire came down from heaven and consumed the burnt offering and the sacrifices, and the glory of the Lord filled the house." So he said this prayer, and this fire came from heaven, consumed everything, and the glory of the Lord filled the house. Now that's something. That's something when God comes. I would have liked, there's lots of things in the Bible that I would like to see. There are things in the Bible that you would like to have seen, right? But I tell you something. I wouldn't go back and trade my spot. I wouldn't go back and trade my spot in history to see any of those things. I wouldn't do that. I mean, as fascinating as they are, I would love to have seen Jesus. I would have loved to run because, I would have been perfect. I wouldn't have been like everybody else. I would have knew he was the Son of God, right? I would have knew all those things. But I would love to see Jesus, wouldn't you? And run and latch on to him, He'd be like, he'd be prying on me like he did Mary. Don't get Quentin. Come on. Right? I would love that. I'd love to see Jesus. I would like to see the fire on the mountain. I would like to see the fire come down and God dwell in the temple. I would like to see all those magnificent things. The children of Israel walking through the water, the Red Sea, and parting it, the Jordan River part, and all those things, marching around the walls of Jericho, and they're falling down, and the children of Israel. I would like to see all of those things. Jesus healing the sick and the blind, it'd be amazing. But I wouldn't want to go back and live then and trade any of that stuff for the time that I live in now. Because today we're living on the 50-yard line, and we've got front row seats to the Super Bowl of all of history. We are living in the showdown of the end. There's not a more magnificent place. The greatest thing that's ever going to occur is the coming of Jesus Christ, and I believe it is near at hand. Many of us will witness that. And there is nothing that takes the place of that. I would like to see some of those things. In 1 Kings, we get the story of Elijah. 1 Kings chapter 18, where he went up on Mount Carmel, and he was up there on top of Mount Carmel, right? And he had the showdown with the prophets, and that's another one I'd like to see, where they made the altar, and he wet his altar down with water, and fire came down and melted the rocks in the altar and dried up everything. I would have liked to have seen that too. But again, fire came down. Every time we see about God, it was really interesting as I was looking up fire in the Bible, in the Old Testament. Every time that fire was ever mentioned, it was a significant event. Because when God shows up, it's something. Second Kings, if you would turn with me to 2 Kings. And in 2 Kings chapter 2. 2 Kings chapter 2. And in 2 Kings chapter 2, as we begin reading there, it's a story about Elijah. And he's getting ready to go to heaven. And Elisha, he followed Elijah. And there's a whole lesson in that. He wouldn't let Elijah get out of his sight. Elisha kept following Elijah, and he wouldn't let him get out of his sight, And so, and there's a whole story to that, how we need to hang on too, right? And so, but anyway, here in 2 Kings chapter 2, verse 11, it says, "And it came to pass, as they still went on and talked, that behold, there appeared a chariot of fire and horses of fire And they parted them both asunder, and Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven. Now, have you ever thought about that? I remember I used to think about that when I was a little kid. You know, that was the first hot rod, right? God was into hot rods. But man, that must have been a heated ride, man. That was hot. A chariot of fire. A chariot of fire pulls up. What do you think? You think, man, that's nice, but no thanks, right? That's nice, but no thanks. I don't want to get in that. I don't want to burn up. You know, I don't want to do that. That's a bad thing. I mean, Satan is the god of fire, right? But every time God shows up, wow, it's fire. And a chariot of fire comes down. And Elijah, it's like no big deal, man. He jumps up in the chariot of fire. What does he do? He rides away. A chariot of fire and horses of fire. Man, God's all about fire. When I was thinking of that, I thought of another interesting verse in 2 Kings, over a few pages in chapter 6. 2 Kings chapter 6, beginning with verse 14. 2 Kings chapter 6, beginning with verse 14. And the king of Syria was coming up against Israel. And he would have a plan. And every time he would have a strategic plan to overtake Israel, they would already know what he was going to do, because Elijah was telling them. And so the king of Syria says, man, how do they know what we're going to do every time before we do it? And somebody told him, I wonder how they knew, but somebody told him, they said, man, they got a prophet. It's Elijah. He knows what you're doing, and he tells them. So he says, well, we'll take care of that. We'll go get this guy. We'll go get this Elijah. We'll go get him. And so here in 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 14, he says, therefore sent he thither horses and chariots. You know, horses, chariots, and a great host. And they came by night and surrounded the city about where Elijah was and his servant. And when the servant of the man of God was risen early in the morning, and he went forth, behold, a host compassed the city, both with horses and chariots. And his servant said unto him, alas, my master, how shall we go? You know, he goes out, probably getting some water early in the morning. He looks, he sees the horses. They've got the city surrounded. So he runs back to Elijah. He says, dude, they've got the whole city surrounded. They've come up in the middle of the night. They've come to get us. What are we going to do? And Elijah, he says this prayer here. In verse 16, it says, and he answered, fear not, for they that be with us are more than they that be with them. And this morning in our Bible study class, Ron was talking about a fourth dimension. You know, when Adam and Eve sinned, they lost that fourth dimension. And I've thought about the fourth dimension a lot. You know, there's another dimension out there that we can't see anymore. Sin has removed that. You know, we see in 3 dimensions. You know, you take a box, you flip it up, we can see the right side, the left side, the top side. 3 dimensions. We can't see the back side. Maybe. We've already talked about the fourth dimension, but maybe there's 6 dimensions. Right? Because there's still another backside and the backside and the bottom that we can't see. Right? There's 3 more that we're missing there. Maybe one day we're going to see all of those things. And I will not belabor and go into this, but I've preached sermons on this before. You know, colors will have smell, and all these extra senses we will have that we don't have today. Things that were originally designed that we don't have or we're not prepared for. The mind cannot begin to imagine the great things that the Lord has prepared for us. Amen. And he says here, he says in verse 17, and Elijah prayed and said, Lord, I pray thee. Big old long prayer right here. That's a huge prayer. He says, Lord, I pray you, open his eyes that he may see. Amen. Right? I like that. Open his eyes that he may see. And the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire round about Elijah. Now, what do you think that did? I mean, it's one thing to have an army, right? I mean, Elijah showed him an army, and they could have had chariots and horses, right? And that would have been helpful. You know, that would have said, okay, that makes me feel a little better, right? Because those guys out there, they've got chariots and horses, right? But God says, no, this is my chariots and horses right here. He has chariots and horses of fire, right? And so the guy looked around, he sees all these chariots and horses of fire, right? And he's like, oh, yeah, I ain't scared. Amen. There's no reason. We've got more on our side than they've got on their side. In every way, shape, and form. Satan took a third of the angels with him. And you know what that means. If Satan's got a third, that means we still got 2/3. There's no way he can outbeat us. There's no way. But let me tell you this. If Satan would have took all the angels and all the creatures out of heaven, and he had every host and every being and everything on his own side, and all there was God, it would still be shamefully. He would still be shamefully outnumbered and outpowered. God. Could it be that maybe, just maybe, Satan is not the fire god? Maybe God is the God of fire. Now, Michael read our scripture reading today, and it come from the book of Isaiah. And it comes from the book of Isaiah chapter 33. And it makes a lot more meaning and a lot more insightful now that we've looked at some of these things. And Isaiah chapter 33 verse 14 is the text that he read. And it ended with a question. And it says, the sinners in Zion are afraid. Fearfulness hath surprised the hypocrites. Who among us shall dwell in the devouring fire? Who among us shall dwell with everlasting burnings? Now that sounds bad, doesn't it? I mean, he's talking about God there, but it's the way that we always envision the devil. Because remember, he loves that. He's a counterfeiter. That's what he does. I'm the God of fire. I'm the burner. But they asked the question, they said, who's going to be able to live in these everlasting burnings? Who's going to live in that eternal fire? Who can live in that brightness? And the answer is in the next verse, verse 15. It says, he that walketh righteously and speaks uprightly. In the book of Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 24, it's written in two places in the Bible, in the Old Testament and the New Testament. Deuteronomy 4:24 and also Hebrews 12:29. You know what those texts say? They say that God is a consuming fire. God is a consuming fire. Now, there's a passage in 1 John chapter 4, verse 8. In that passage, if you don't know exactly what it says, you will when I tell you, because I'm sure you've heard it before. 1 John chapter 4, verse 8. And it says that if we don't love, that we don't know God, because God is love. God is a consuming fire, and God is love. My friends, God is a hunk of burning love. Are you with me? God is a hunk of burning love. He is the real hunk of burning love. Right? And there's something foolishness out there trying to take his place of where he should be. God should be number one. But there's something ridiculous out there trying to take the first place of where God should be. Just like that song. Now I want you to look with me in 2 Chronicles this morning. 2 Chronicles chapter 5. We're going to go back. 2 Chronicles chapter 5. And in 2 Chronicles chapter 5, I want to begin looking there at verse 12. 2 Chronicles chapter 5. And I want to begin reading at verse 12. 2 Chronicles chapter 5, verse 12. Now, this was when Solomon was dedicating the temple that he had built. Okay? 2 Chronicles chapter 5, beginning verse 12. And I want you to look at this with me. The Bible says, also the Levites, which were the singers, of all them of Asaph, of Heman, of Jeduthun, with their sons and their brothers, being arrayed in white linen. Now get this. Having cymbals and psalteries and harps, they stood at the east end of the altar, and with them 120 priests sounding with trumpets. By the way, you know what another name for? I always talk about this. I like this. Another name for a trumpet. It's called a sackbut. A sackbut, right? How would you like to play the sackbut? I'm a sackbuttist. I play the sackbut. I'd like to be a sackbut player. I don't know, sackbut. I play anyway. Sounding with trumpets. Okay? And it came even to pass, as the trumpets and the singers were as one, to make one sound, to be heard in praising and thanking the Lord. And when they lifted up their voice, and the trumpets and the cymbals and all the instruments of music, and they praised the Lord, saying, for he is good, for his mercy endureth forever. And then the house was filled with a cloud, even the house of the Lord, so that the priest could not stand to minister by reasoning of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord had filled the house of God. They brought all their instruments, and they all played these instruments, and they were all singing, and they were all praising God. And as they were doing that and humbling themselves down, and as I told you just a minute ago, King David got down on his knees and bowed down. As they were doing this, God came. You got that? That's the way it was done. That's how they laid it down back then. That's how they did it. It's like us now, you know, that's how we are, singing and praising and all these things. Margie praises. Amen. Amen, sister. That's right. They were praising the Lord and playing all those instruments and everything. Yeah. Now I want you to turn with me to the book of Daniel. I want you to go with me to Daniel, and we're going to look at chapter 3. Daniel chapter 3. And I'm going to try to wrap this up in 10 minutes for you. Daniel chapter 3. And everything that God has and everything that God does, Satan has a phony, junky counterfeit for it. Daniel chapter 3, beginning with verse 1. And it says that Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, whose height was 60 cubits. That's 60 cubits. Now some of you have, this is in the King James Version, some of you have like a New International Version or NIV version or something like that, and that's fine. But what they do there is convert them to like English measurements, and it sort of loses the meaning of it when it does that. But it says here in Daniel chapter 3, verse 1, it says, Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits. That's 60 cubits high. And the breadth of it thereof was 6 cubits. And it doesn't mention the back, because if they don't mention the back, it's 6 cubits too. If they say, well, it's 6 wide, then that's what it means. It's 6 by 6, it's square. And so it's 60 high, 6 wide, it's 6 deep. You get that? They made an image, and the measurements, or other words, for a better word, the number of that image that they made, the number was 6, 6, and 6. Do you see that? Everything in Babylon, the whole kingdom, the whole mathematical system, they came up, they were some of the smartest mathematicians. They came up with all of these things. You know, a triangle has 180 degrees and it's divisible by 60. And 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour. Everything they came up with was a 666. It was just a magical number for them. They loved it. 6. Everything in Babylon was 6. If it wasn't 6, it was divisible by 6. Now, he set up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. And then Nebuchadnezzar the king, he got together with the princes. Now, if you look in Daniel 6 chapter 1, when Darius set up his kingdom, you know how many princes he had? He had 120 princes. Do you remember what we were just reading about the temple? How God had 120 priests. Everything that God has, Satan tries to mock it. He tries to copy it. He has a counterfeit for it. But here they go in Daniel chapter 3, verse 2. It says, Then Nebuchadnezzar, the king, set up to gather together princes, the governors, the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar, the king, had set up. And the princes and governors and captains and judges and treasurers and counselors and sheriffs and all the rulers of the provinces were gathered together. You know, the author writes that like that. It's like, man, I'm tired of reading all that. I get it. They were all there. And the Bible says, okay, you get it, don't you? Good. Right? That's like me. I preach the same thing. Sometimes John said, you've preached that sermon before. I said, good, now you get it. Right? Sometimes you got to tell people, and that's normal. Sometimes people have to hear something 5,000 times before I get it. I get that all the time from people. They say, you know, I'm sorry. I know you've told me before, but I've forgotten. I can't remember. You've told me like 5 times. Will you tell me again? Yes. Call me at 3 o'clock in the morning. Something I've told you 1,000 times. I will sit down and patiently explain it to you again, my friend, because when I tell you something 1,000 times and you still forget it, what that means is you are a human being. That's what that means, okay? And that's what I'm here for. That's my job. If I get cranky or smart or hate or anything, you say, that's your job. Right? That's your job. And so, he says here in verse 3, Daniel chapter 3, verse 3, we read that. Verse 4, it says, and then a herald cried aloud, to you is commanded, O people, nations, tongues, and languages, that at the time of the year, get this, verse 5, at what time you hear the sound of the cornet, and the flute, the harp, the sackbut, the psaltery, the dulcimer, and all kinds of music, that you fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king has set up. Have we heard that before? Is that new? Did he create that? Was this some magical form of worship that he came up with on his own? We just got through reading it. It's an imitation. It's a false makeup in a different image. We made this image up. You bow down to this image. Whose number is 666? Now, I believe the book of Revelation tells us something in chapter 13 about an image being erected and people being forced to bow down to that image. And those who will not, they will not allow you to buy and sell. My friends, what happened in Babylon, ancient Babylon, is going to happen in modern day spiritual Babylon. The same thing. But not just that, the whole event is going to happen. And let me try to bring this in for you. And so verse 7, it says, therefore at that time, the people heard the sound of all that music and all that stuff going on. But in verse 8, it says, wherefore at that time certain Chaldeans came near, and they accused the Jews. And they told the king Nebuchadnezzar that his old king lived forever. You have made a decree that any man that hears all this music and stuff and the sackbut and the psaltery and all that good stuff shall fall down and worship the image. Verse 11, and whosoever fall down not in worship, that he should be cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, and they have not regarded thee, and they have not worshipped your gods or the golden image which you have put up. And Nebuchadnezzar in his rage and fury commanded that they bring them to him. And when he brought him to him, the men before the king, it says in verse 14, Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, is it not true that you don't bow down, that you don't do these things and worship the statue that I've set up? In verse 15, he said, but now let me tell you something. He says, I'm losing my patience. He says, I'm losing my patience. But if you'll work with me, okay? Verse 15, he says, now if you'll be ready, at what time you hear the sound of the cornet, the flute, the harp, the sackbut played by my musician Quentin, and the psaltery and the dulcimer, all kinds of music, he says, then you can fall down and worship the image. And man, these guys are so bold. Let me tell you what I would have done. I know me. I know me. I've been through stuff like this before. I know me. And my way would have worked too, okay? But it's just not like them. Here's what I would have done. He would have said, when that music plays, I'm going to give you a second shot, and I want you to bow down. And I would have did something like this. Right? And when the music played, I'd have stood there. Right? That's the way I would have handled it. I would have stood there. He would have still threw me into a fiery furnace too. The point would have been made, but I try to structure out there. You know, I try to live as long as I can. Right? I try. Right? But they said, they come to him here in verse 16. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said unto the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we're not careful to answer you in this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known, O king, that we will not serve your gods nor worship your golden image which you have set upon us. Here's what they said. Don't waste your time. We ain't bowing. Don't waste your time. And another thing, even if we die in that fiery furnace and God chooses to let us die, we still ain't going to bow down to your God. Now that's pretty strong, ain't it? That's strong. I want to be there. I want to be there. I think I'm there, right? But that's what Peter thought. That's what Peter thought. It's different when you're standing there before the king and that stuff's going on. They said, we'll do it. And so then he got very mad, right? And then verse 20, it says, and he commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. And these men were bound in their coats, and their hosen, and their hats, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. You notice that? They bound them up in their coats. Put them in their coats. Wrapped them up in their coats. The Bible made sure that it told you that they had their coats on when they went in that fiery furnace. Made sure it told you that they had their coats on. You know, little Joseph in the Old Testament, his brothers hated him, but he had a little coat. He had a little coat. His father made him a coat of many colors, and he had a coat. And they hated him because he had that coat on. And friends, when you got the righteousness of Jesus on you, and your life's given to Jesus, and God has got his coat of righteousness around you because he loves you, and it's a symbol of the Father's love, people are going to hate you too. They're going to hate you. And Joseph had that little coat on, right? And they even ripped that coat off of him and threw Joseph and sold him to the slave traders. And they came back, and the brothers who took that coat, you notice that when they came back, they had that coat dipped in blood, and they gave it to the father. And what happened? That coat hid their sins and got them out of trouble. They presented that coat, see? Their coat. The coat's what saved them. And the coat will save us. The Bible speaks in Isaiah chapter 61, verse 10. It says that Jesus will give us a coat of righteousness. Jesus is talking in John chapter 15, verse 22. He's talking there and he says, you know, I've came and you're sinners. He says, now that I've came, he says, you're sinners. You're not following me. And because you're not following me, he says, you don't have a coat to cover your sins. Jesus' robe of righteousness is what we got to have to make it. That robe of righteousness, my friend, is a fire suit. You see a fireman, they put those suits on, they can run into the house, right, and they don't burn up. If you're going to make it to heaven, if you're going to be with God, you got to have on the righteousness of Jesus Christ. You got to have that coat on. And so, verse 22. Remember, everything in Babylon is 6. Verse 22 of Daniel chapter 3, it says, therefore, before the king's commandment was urgent, and the furnace exceedingly hot. I want to back up to verse 19. It says, Nebuchadnezzar was full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Therefore he spake and commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was wont to be heated. He says, I want you to make that fire 7 times hotter than it's ever been before. Why not 6? That was their number. Why not? Well, I'm here to tell you why. Because 6 was the number of Babylon, but 7 is the number of that's right. And it was a godly fire. That was the fire of God in that oven that was burning. They set it on 7. Nebuchadnezzar didn't even know why he said it. He just come up with 7 because God put it in him. And he built a fire that was 7 times hotter. It was a fire of God. It was a godly fire. And he took Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, and he wrapped them up in those coats, their coats that they already had on because they were in love with Jesus and they gave their life to the Lord. And he wrapped them up in those coats and he threw them in the fire. And when he threw them in the fire, verse 23, it says, and these men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down, bound in the midst of the burning fiery furnace. And then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished, and he rose up in haste, and spake and said unto his counselors, did we not put 3 men bound to the fire? And they said unto the king, true, O king. And he answered and said, lo, I see 4 down in there, loose, walking around in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt. And the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. Amen. Because the Bible says that when Jesus returns, that every knee is going to bow and every tongue is going to confess that he's the Son of God. Amen. They're all going to know him then. They may not know him now, but they're all going to know him then. And then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace, and he took him out of there. He says, come out here, come out, come on out. Now, my friends, when we look at that and we see that God is a burning hunk of fiery love, it shines a little light on the passages in 2 Thessalonians 2:8 when it says that when God comes, he will destroy them with the brightness of his coming. Do you see it now? God will destroy. Psalm 68 verse 2 says that the wicked will melt away like wax before God when he appears. Do you know why? Because they don't have on the suit. They don't have on the cloak of righteousness of Jesus Christ. He comes and they don't have on the fire suit, and they cannot dwell in the everlasting burnings of Jesus when he comes. So when he comes in that big ball of fire, whoosh, they burn up. They are consumed when he appears and stricken dead by the brightness of his coming. Satan has a counterfeit for everything, and I'm sorry, I'm running over, but I'm fixing to finish, I promise. I was reading the other day, this blowed my mind, that anywhere in the United States at any given time, they said there are approximately 10,000 doctors operating with doctors' offices and stuff and people in hospitals. I don't know how they get away with this. But there are anywhere approximately 10,000 doctors in the United States working as doctors and physicians at any given time, and they don't have licenses. They're not doctors. Yeah. And that happens. You know, we've heard just around here people that go to jail because they don't have certain licenses and stuff, different things. But they're going around acting like doctors, but they're not really doctors. People are confused and they're bought in by that. They automatically assume they got a doctor's office, they got a place to go in there. They talk well, they seem to know what they're saying, and most of these people are somewhat of a doctor, but they don't have the degrees or the certificates or the things that they need, the licenses. Counterfeits going on all the time that many people are unaware of. And Satan copies God at everything, all kinds of counterfeits, and I had a bunch listed, but I'm going to go with this one. Satan knows that God is a consuming fire. He knows everything about it. Do you know that Satan knows more about the Bible than any of us do? That makes me a little bit jealous. I got to be honest with you. I'm a little upset with it. That's the reason I keep studying. I want to catch up. I want to know as much as he does. He knows more about God than we do. Do you not think that Satan does not know that God is a consuming fire? So he even made up a fake consuming fire for people to worship. You know, that was the number one practice of worship in the day of the Romans and the Greeks. They all worshiped the sun. They all worshiped the sun. It was entrenched in sun god worship. And I want you to turn your Bibles to the book of Malachi with me, chapter 4. They were all entrenched in sun god worship. As a matter of fact, you know, they even named the days after the planets, after the constellations and the planets and the gods of their time. You know, Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday, they're all named after certain gods. And I don't know all the names of those gods. Thursday is Thor. For some reason I can remember that one. But they named Thursday after the god of Thor. And then Saturday was named after the planet Saturn. Right? And Monday was named after the moon. Right? That's how we get to that. Now Sunday, what day do you think that was named after? It was named after the sun. That's where it comes from. Sunday. And that was the number one day. That was the big day. That was the day that the main God that they all worshiped. The burning ball in the sky. He even set up a fake hunk of burning love. He didn't make it, but he sure used it. The sun. He fooled the whole world into worshiping a false ball of fire in the sky. The Roman name for it, I thought this was interesting. The Greek name is Helios for the sun god, but the Roman name was Sol. That's where S-O-L, that's where we get solar system. And he said, you will bow down to this fake sun. Now I tell you, the day is coming. The day is coming. As it come upon Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, the day is coming where they're going to say, you will bow down. On Sunday, you will bow down. The same thing that came upon them is going to come upon us. It's important. When I looked at all this today, this verse came to my mind. And for the first time, it really made sweet sense to me. I liked it. It's here in Malachi chapter 4, and I'm going to end with this. Malachi chapter 4, verse 1. It says, for behold, the day comes that shall burn as an oven. Notice that. You get that? The day comes that shall burn as an oven. Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, they went into a fiery furnace or an oven. The day comes that it shall burn as an oven, and all the proud and all they that do wicked shall be stubble. And the day cometh that shall burn them up, said the Lord of hosts, that it shall leave them neither root nor branch. But unto you that fear my name shall the Son, S-U-N, but this is the Son of righteousness, the Son of righteousness, shall arise with healing in his wings. And ye shall go forth and grow up as calves in the stall. And ye shall tread down the wicked, for they shall be ashes under the soles of your feet in the day that I shall do this, saith the Lord. See, there's a fake son. There's a whole fake system of worship. There's a whole counterfeit there. But Jesus says that the real son, the Son of righteousness, is going to come home. He's going to take us home with him. He's going to appear, and we're going to be able to dwell in the everlasting burnings. It's not going to bother us like the bush that didn't burn up. As Moses was proud to walk to the top of that mountain and walk into the fire, we should be happy and feel free to walk into the fire and the glory of God when he returns, because we have waited on him. He is God, and we have prepared ourselves for him. And we'll say, this is our Lord. We've waited on him, and he's come for us. And on that day, I want to look around and it's all standing there. And the wicked will be falling down around us, and people will be dying and crying for, as it gets closer and closer, for rocks to fall upon them. And we'll be looking around like, what's up? What's up? Right? Like Daniel, Shadrach, not Daniel, but Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego would be able to live in that fire, but not alone. From that day forward, with Jesus Christ, just like they were. Amen. Praise the Lord. We're going to have our announcements now.